Hi there, Rock members. I'm Julia Curry, and I'm here with Jeremiah Ward, who's our finances wizard. And this is a short video to help you deepen your understanding of the balance sheets, right? So as you know, you get a lot of financial reports, and the big picture around those is the trending report. So maybe you came here from looking at the trending report, but maybe you didn't. So this video is just talking about that one report, the balance sheet report. That's part of the whole suite to help you just get a better sense of what's in it, what is it for. So we are using the balance sheet from an actual rock in Vermont, but it's anonymous. And in this video, we're going to cover the parts of that report that you will use most often. So it's kind of a 101. We are thinking we'll make a second video to go a little deeper into the other parts. And so if folks have any questions about the other stuff on these reports, feel free to let us know. We want to answer the questions you have. So we wanted to start with really an overview of what are the sections on the balance sheet. Jeremiah, you wanna explain all that for us?
For sure, will do. So as Julia said, this is a balance sheet from a real co-op. We just removed the name, so it says Cooperative Inc. And one of the first things to point out about a balance sheet is it shows balances pertaining to your co-op at a particular point in time, in this case, April 30th of 2020, which is a little different from the profit and loss reports that you might look at, which show what your, say, plowing bills are over the budget year or over a month. So those are profit and loss reports, show things over a span of time, and this report shows things at a point in time. And like Julia said, there's three parts. There's a section called the assets. What that's doing is totaling up all of the different things that your co-op owns, starting from your various bank accounts, the cash that your co-op has, to other things, including the value of the land. And if your co-op has any buildings, those would show up on the assets. And if you had any vehicles or equipment, those would also show up here. The next section of the balance sheet shows the liabilities of the co-op. And here is the amount of money that the co-op might owe, either in a loan or in your mortgage, or it could even be the amount of money owed to vendors and unpaid bills. Those are totaled up here under total liabilities, the amount of money that your co-op owes to businesses and lenders. And then the third section is called equity, which totals up the value of your co-op that your members own outright.
All right. Okay, so Jeremiah, I want to make sure I understand it and our boards understand it, right? Assets isn't just money, right? This includes, so we're seeing that this includes the bank accounts, but also other things. So maybe in our personal lives, like a corollary would be, I have a car, I'm still paying off the loan on the car, right? So in that case, what would be the asset? What would be the liability? What would be the equity?
That's great. That's a great example. So the asset would be the value of the car, say a $10,000 car, that would show up somewhere down here under equipment and have a total for the amount of value of the car, as if you were to go and sell that car, and theoretically you'd be able to get that $10,000 back for the car. So it would be listed here as something you could potentially sell to turn into cash to use, would show up there. And then under the liability section, what would show up would be what your current balance of principal you owe on the loan for the car is. So if you've been paying a loan for a couple years and your balance currently is $7,000 that you still owe the bank, that $7,000 would show here. And then the remaining amount, the amount you've paid on the loan, that you own outright of that car as the $3,000 left over would show up here.
Okay. And let's say I improved the car, I put on a roof rack and a hitch. Just making it up, but
Right.
Maybe those would also show up as assets, or they would increase the value of the asset or something like that.
Correct.
Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say. There would potentially be, if your car and your household accounting was done the same way that your property manager is doing accounting, there would be probably a line that's called vehicle improvement, and it would show the added value that you've put into your car would be reflected under assets.
Nice. Thanks. All right. So going into a little more detail about the things that you all are likely to look at pretty regularly, or that you really want to pay attention to, right? There are really 5 or 6 of these. The first one is to look at your bank balances and your escrow balances, right, under your assets. And these you're going to put into the trending report so that you can see how they're doing over time. Just as a side note, you want to remember that escrows are pots of money that are set aside, and typically that you're not maintaining, but your lender is maintaining. So if you have your loan with Rock Capital, it's money that you're sending to Rock Capital, or your bookkeeper sending to Rock Capital, and they're maintaining for those specific purposes. Typically it's your insurance and your taxes. So that's an escrow.
The second point that's common to look at on the balance sheet, but it's one to be aware of, is the accounts receivable balance on the balance sheet. Oftentimes will look rosier than the real balance of past due rents owed. Accounts receivable is past due rents, and on the balance sheet, it looks better than it probably really is because of the way the books are done by your property manager. Prepaid rents that people have been paying ahead get reflected in that total, and so it makes things look good. So if you want to understand the actual amount of past due rent owed by your co-op, there's another report called the Accounts Receivable Aging Report, which just has who owes rent totaled up. So just be aware when you look at the accounts receivable on the balance sheet, it's probably going to be rosier than the reality, which is on another report.
Good to know. And just as a side note, it's not your property manager's fault. This is basically how the software and accrual accounting combine. They don't really have a way around that, typically.
Yep. Okay.
Another thing that you're going to check for is your co-op's unpaid bills to vendors. So, what we like to see is that there aren't any, right? But if there are, the total will show up here on the balance sheet, and then you'll want to go to that accounts payable report to see the breakout.
And then another thing that you'll find on the balance sheet is the current loan principal balance that the co-op owes to its lender at that point in time, which is good to see. You'll see most likely have quite a ways to go, but over time that amount is going to go down, and that equity, the part that the co-op owns outright, is going to grow. So that's also encouraging to see over time.
It's a happy thing to remind yourself of. Okay. One other item that's kind of similar, you don't need to do much with it, but it's nice to check, is the members' share equity. So this is not in the assets section. It's down at the bottom in the equity section, right? This is the amounts that your members have paid in when they joined. So it's the membership fee, or, share in the co-op. So you do want to at some point check and see whether the numbers add up, right? Whether it's, whatever your fee is, for a lot of rocks, it's $100 per household, right? So it should be 100 times the number of households. And if that's off, you'll want to figure out why that is and what you want to do about that. So those are really the main items you're going to be looking at regularly. we will, obviously there's a lot of other stuff on this page, right? So these are some of the things that we thought it might be good to talk about a bit in a follow-up video, just so you know what they are and why they're there. Some of them are really there for purely for accounting purposes. So when you have your, you know, your books audited at the end of the year, it's information that your accountant is going to need, or your auditor is going to need. But so that's some of what we'll dive into more in the 201 video.
Thanks everyone for watching. We hope you found it useful, and stay tuned for the next video.
Yeah. And thanks for learning about your RUP.